at exactly 3:19 in the morning. The alarm system inside the royal treasury went silent, and for a few seconds that should never have existed. The most protected room in the city stood completely defenseless. The winter air hung cold over the quiet European capital, as streetlights flickered along empty cobblestone roads, and the grand historical museum complex slept behind iron gates that had not been forced open in centuries. Yet somewhere in the darkness, a small group of men moved with a calm confidence that suggested they had studied this place longer than the guards who protected it. And when the first security camera briefly glitched, the men were already inside the courtyard, where a ladder leaned silently against a stone wall older than any living witness. And the men climbed without speaking, because silence was their greatest ally tonight. Inside the museum, the royal vault remained sealed behind reinforced glass. Inside it, treasures accumulated over generations of monarchs rested. Under soft golden lights, ceremonial jewels, diamond-studded decorations, historic brooches worn by kings during coronations, and intricate emerald ornaments that had survived revolutions, wars, and political collapse. Yet the one thing those centuries had never faced was a modern crime, executed with absolute patience and calculation. In a quiet control room, a security guard named Adrian Falk sat slouched in a chair, staring at the glowing wall of monitors while rubbing his tired eyes, unaware that the camera feed he trusted had already been subtly interrupted minutes earlier by someone who understood the system far too well. And somewhere beneath the building's marble corridors, a maintenance tunnel carried faint echoes of footsteps, where the intruders moved slowly every step, measured every breath, controlled because they knew exactly where they were going. The leader of the group was a man known only among his partners as Victor, a tall figure whose movements were precise and deliberate, the kind of man who rarely raised his voice, yet commanded attention simply by standing still. And as he paused beside the heavy vault door, his gloved hands rested calmly against the cold metal, while his eyes studied the hinges with the focus of someone solving a puzzle rather than committing a crime. "Tre minutos," he whispered quietly, without turning his head. And the other two figures behind him nodded silently, as one opened a compact tool case and another unfolded a small thermal device that began warming the reinforced frame around the display cabinet inside the vault chamber. Their work, almost surgical in its precision, because brute force would have triggered alarms instantly, but patience was their true weapon tonight. Above them, the city remained silent. A distant tram clattered along empty tracks while snow drifted softly. Across the museum courtyard and inside the vault, the jewels glittered under soft museum lights, completely unaware that history itself was about to be stolen. Adrian Falk glanced again at the monitors, unaware that the camera covering the vault corridor was replaying a loop recorded earlier that night, a perfect imitation of stillness. While only a few meters away, the real corridor held three men moving quietly through shadows that cameras no longer saw. Victor studied the display case containing a royal emerald ornament on an elaborate brooch, once worn during a coronation ceremony centuries ago, and for a moment, even he seemed to hesitate, not out of fear, but from a strange awareness that what he was touching was not merely wealth, but history, itself a silent witness to the rise and fall of empires. Yet hesitation lasted only a heartbeat before his voice returned to its calm command. "Now," he said softly. The heated tool pressed against the frame. The glass softened gradually under controlled heat, and within seconds, the reinforced case that had protected the treasure for decades opened without a sound, and the room filled with a strange quiet reverence as the jewels were lifted one by one into a padded bag while soft reflections danced across their surfaces like trapped fragments of forgotten royal ceremonies. Outside, a distant police siren wailed somewhere far across the sleeping city, completely unrelated yet strangely ominous, as if the night itself sensed what was happening within the museum walls. One of the men whispered nervously, "We should move," his voice tight with the awareness that every second increased the risk of discovery. But Victor raised a single finger calmly, without looking away from the case. 30 seconds, he said quietly, his tone steady, because precision mattered more than speed, and mistakes happened only when fear rushed to the mind. When the final piece was lifted, the display case stood empty, except for faint impressions where jewels had rested for generations. And in that moment, a silent gap appeared in history that no alarm had yet announced. The men sealed the bag and retraced their steps through the corridor where the camera loop still showed. Nothing but quiet marble floors. And when Adrian Falk finally leaned forward with sudden confusion, it was because the system abruptly reset itself. after the loop ended, revealing an empty corridor where seconds earlier, unseen figures had already disappeared. By the time the first alarm began screaming through the museum halls, the thieves were already climbing back over the courtyard wall into the cold darkness beyond, their vehicle waiting in an alley where no security camera faced the street, and the engine started smoothly before disappearing into the early winter fog that drifted slowly through the silent city streets. When investigators arrived that morning, the vault door stood closed exactly as it should have been, the display lights still glowing softly over empty space where priceless artifacts had once rested. And the first detective who stepped into the room stopped abruptly because the absence felt louder than any destruction. Detective Leon Hartman had spent 20 years investigating organized crime across the country, and he had seen many forms of greed and desperation. But standing before that empty case, he felt something different, an unsettling awareness that whoever had done this possessed patience, discipline, and a deep understanding of systems designed by experts. They didn't rush, he murmured quietly while studying the frame of the case, his hands folded behind his back as he leaned closer to inspect the softened metal edges. They studied us. Behind him, technicians photographed every surface while historians whispered anxiously about the cultural loss unfolding before them, because these were not simply expensive objects, but fragments of heritage that connected the present 2 centuries of human story, and their disappearance felt like a wound in the memory of the nation itself. Surveillance footage soon revealed the moment the cameras had looped, and investigators realized the thieves had not broken through the main entrance at all, but used maintenance tunnels mapped only in old architectural plans stored deep within municipal archives. Someone researched this, Hartman said quietly during the briefing later that day while a large digital map glowed across the investigation room wall, every corridor highlighted with careful precision. Someone patient enough to wait months. The city reacted with shock as news spread that one of the most secure treasure vaults in Europe had been breached, without a single shot fired, and suddenly the story was no longer just about missing jewels, but about human ambition, calculation, and the dangerous belief that intelligence could outmaneuver consequences. Weeks passed as investigators traced stolen vehicles, interrogated informants, and followed whispers through the criminal underworld, where rumors traveled faster than facts. And slowly the outline of a small organized group began to emerge, men who believed their planning made them untouchable. Yet what those men failed to understand was that every crime, no matter how perfect it appears, leaves behind invisible threads, woven into time itself. A fingerprint missed by a hurried glove, a surveillance reflection captured in a distant storefront, window a phone signal detected briefly near the museum walls, tiny fragments of truth waiting patiently for someone determined enough to connect them. Detective Hartman followed those fragments relentlessly, often late into the night, while reviewing hours of footage frame by frame, studying shadows and reflections until patterns began to emerge, and as weeks turned into months, the invisible threads slowly tightened around the men who had once walked confidently through the silent vault corridor. One rainy evening, investigators raided an abandoned warehouse outside the city where a hidden compartment beneath a concrete floor revealed fragments of packaging materials used to transport delicate objects. And although the jewels themselves were gone, the discovery confirmed what Hartman had suspected from the beginning. The crime had never truly been invisible, only temporarily hidden beneath layers of patience and silence. Arrests followed months later, when investigators identified members of the group through phone records and surveillance, overlaps that placed them together during the planning phase, and during interrogation, the calm confidence that once guided their movements slowly dissolved into uneasy silence as evidence accumulated piece by piece on the table between them. Victor, whose real name investigators finally uncovered, sat motionless across from Hartman under the harsh interrogation room lights, his hands folded quietly while the detective spoke in a calm voice that carried no anger, only the quiet weight of inevitability. "You planned everything," Hartman sighed, sliding photographs of the vault across the table. "Every detail." Victor's eyes rested on the images for a long moment before he finally looked up again. "Planning isn't the same as escaping consequences," Hartman continued softly. For the first time that night, Victor's shoulders shifted slightly, as if the sentence had landed deeper than expected, because somewhere beneath his discipline he understood a truth that no thief could fully avoid. Intelligence might delay justice, but it rarely defeats it forever. Trials followed, revealing the elaborate months-long preparation behind the theft. The stolen vehicles burned afterward, the hidden tunnels studied through old blueprints, and the calculated belief that precision alone could erase accountability. Yet as the courtroom sessions unfolded, something else slowly became clear. Real cost of the crime was not only financial, but cultural, a loss felt by historians, citizens, and generations who would never see the treasures as they once existed. Some jewels were eventually recovered. Others remained missing somewhere beyond borders and private collections. Silent reminders that history once stolen can rarely be completely restored. Detective Hartman visited the museum vault again nearly a year after the crime, standing quietly before the restored display cases, where replicas now filled the spaces left behind. And the room looked beautiful again under soft golden lights, yet he knew the absence still existed beneath the surface, like a scar hidden beneath polished stone. Crime often begins with ambition, sometimes even brilliance. But ambition without conscience slowly transforms intelligence into destruction. And those who believe their careful planning makes them invincible often forget the simplest truth of human life. Every action writes a consequence somewhere in the future, waiting patiently to be read. Sometimes that consequence arrives slowly, quietly, and with the calm certainty of justice that cannot be permanently outrun. Sometimes, one wrong choice can destroy a lifetime. Learn from their story. Choose kindness. Choose life. This was just the beginning. The most mysterious and shocking crime stories are still ahead. Subscribe to Crime Flow Narratives and be among the first to uncover what comes next.